Can you hear me? Great. Brilliant, okay, my slides are there, perfect. My heart rate is a healthy 140, and we can kick off. So I'm gonna try and make this a little bit interactive, just by a show of hands. Hands up if you work in product, like directly, product management. Okay. Keep your hands up if, well, put them down now. Hands up if you work in like data and analytics. Marketing. What else is it? Engineering. Design and UX. Okay, so majority of people here are on the marketing, on the product side of things. Next survey question. Hands up if you're here to gain. So when you go to these events, you're looking to get something out of these talks, right? Whether this one or the event overall. Just by a show of hands. Hands up if you're looking to get examples of how to do your job, like things that you can use in your day-to-day life. Okay, hands up if you're looking to get frameworks that you can use in your day-to-day life. Okay, hands up if you're looking for knowledge. And hands up if you're looking for just inspiration. Okay. I'm going to try and tap on all four of them. So we'll start off with, and sorry, final ones. Hands up if you know what systems thinking means. I know the engineers will probably put their hands up. No, okay, brilliant. So hopefully, at the very least, you'll walk away with understanding what systems thinking is, which you can use in your day-to-day jobs. I don't work for Amplitude, for the record. They have a slot and they gave it to me. I don't know why. They'll probably regret it later. It says ex-director of analytics. Unfortunately, I was part of the third round of layoffs last week, so I thought I'd quickly sneak in the X there. I could have typed it, but as you'll see, I've tried to hand-draw stuff into my presentation. I always spend a lot of time putting effort into the content and never put any time into talking about myself. So today I thought I'd introduce myself. So first and foremost, I'm a dad. Those are my boys, Carl and Ryan. We're Arsenal fans in the family. I was the director of analytics at Hopin. I'm now enjoying the unemployed life, which is fantastic. I highly recommend it. Matt introduced Crap Talks. I won't talk about it. We're a community in London, about 3,000 members. It's fantastic. Come along. I created Keynote.com. Whilst I work in analytics and I love it with a passion, I really like building products, and I realized there was a gap for event organizers to find speakers. So I built a platform for people to go and register as speakers and create your own speaker profile so that you never have to give headshot bio, those classic, hey, we need a headshot, we need a bio. And I like to write a lot. So I've written, about 2 years ago, I started on a journey to write about product analytics, product experimentation, etc. So I've written about 35-ish blog posts over the last 2 years. And I like to paint and draw in my spare time if my kids will let me, as you'll see. So what is a system? System is a set of interconnected components or subsystems working together to achieve some outcome. Your company is a system. For that matter, this event is a system. It's made up of components and subsystems that have been working together to achieve some goal. For example, for today, it's to make this event happen. So actually, rather, this event is the outcome of a system. But there was a whole bunch of things that went into it. So there was the marketing side of things. There was the speakers, sourcing venues, finding refreshments, blah, 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 all of those things. And your company will be exactly the same. Your website or your product is one of the many subsystems in your overall system. It too is made up of multiple subcomponents. So this would be your homepage, your category page, your checkout page. If you're a single page application, it could be the recommendation system. It could be the way that the API that feeds data into your platform. So whatever it is, it's basically a system that's working together. And you get hard systems and you get soft systems. So your product, your marketing campaigns, your analytics platforms, your CRM, all of those things, they will be your hard systems. But then you have your soft systems. These are the people in your company, the people that make your job doable so that you can deliver great products to your customers. These are your people team. These are your finance team, things you don't really think about, but they're all part of the system. They ensure that you get paid, you enjoy your job, you have an office to come to. If you work in manufacturing, they'll be the ones who assign shifts and all of those type of things. So you get your hard systems and you have your soft systems. And all of these systems are usually working together for some desired outcome. For most people, it'll be growth of customers or revenue. My revenue graph was so big, I had to shoot it off to the side there. And then you've got the CEO, the founders, whoever, with dollars in their eyes, looking for, celebrating because of all your hard work. And you'll see that actually, your product, whilst you have an important role, engineering have an important role, design has an important role, the entire product organization is one part of a wider system. You have your marketing teams, your sales teams, your customer service teams, product analytics teams. And we all work together to make the system work and make money or achieve some outcome. But how do you know if your system is optimized and efficient? Measure it, right? You measure your customer experience in the case of product. You measure, if you work in marketing, you look at your CPAs, you look at your ROIs. If you work in the factory, you might look at your manufacturing processes. If you work in engineering, you look at your downtimes, or like error rates and whatever. If you work in the people team, you'll be looking at your employee satisfaction levels. So whatever it is, there will be some measure of success that you can have to measure how efficient your system is and how optimized it is to achieve your goal. Most companies measure this using two classifications metrics, perception metrics and outcome metrics. Your perception metrics are your CSAT scores, your customer effort scores, your CX indexes. And then you have your outcome metrics, which are going to be your NPS, your lifetime value, your retention. Now, these are great, but the problem is that they're lagging metrics. They take a while for you to understand how they're how these metrics have played a part in the overall customer experience. By the time you get those numbers, you're probably a month or so behind a point when you could have actually affected the outcome of those metrics. And they don't always tell you which part of the system is broken, right? Like, if you've got a CSAT score or an NPS survey, it's not going to tell you, oh, this customer had a problem with this, this part of the website or the product. And you don't need me telling you this. You already know this, right? This is where product analysis comes in. By measuring the interaction a customer has with your platform, you can start to identify the problem areas, generate and test hypotheses, and improve the overall customer experience. These are your interaction metrics. You might call them leading indicators, you might call them proxy metrics. It doesn't matter, but this is the point where this is what happens during the customer experience. Your second point, your perception metrics, these are what your customer feels about their experience. And your outcome metrics, this is what your customers do as a result of their overall experience. And when I say what they do, this is, will they refer you to a friend? Will they return? Will they come back and purchase from you again? So these are the things that they're so far removed. And actually, these are the ones these are the ones you care about. These are the things you want to improve, but you can't improve them. By the time you've actually come to measure them, it's probably too late for you guys. So interaction metrics, if you improve these, you'll start to see a residual impact further down the line. But how do you go about improving your interaction metrics and subsequently improving your customer experience? Again, this looks familiar, but you need to measure it, right? So how you would have measured your perception metrics and your outcome metrics, you need to measure your interaction metrics. If we use this, I'm going to go off script a little bit, but if we use this event as an example, imagine this event as a product. At some point, you would have had to measure your sign-up rates. The guys who run this event, the Product-Led Alliance team, should be measuring how many people actually turned up from the point they signed up. They should be measuring how many of you interacted with one of the many booths that are out there. They should be measuring how many of you took part in a snap poll at the start of the talk, like you did just now. They should be measuring how many people are going into these rooms. And all of these things start to paint a picture about the overall customer experience. So I'm going to go back to my system now. So you can use something called an iceberg model. I'm really sorry, I haven't referenced it, but I'll tweet about it afterwards if anyone is interested. My Twitter handle is Dodonerd, D-O-D-O-N-E-R-D. But the iceberg model helps you break down your entire company or your product into something that allows you to interact and affect it directly. And you start off with, like the top of the iceberg. I'm sure you've heard the iceberg analogy before. But actually, the further you go, the more you're able to influence it. So I'm going to go a bit further into it now. So right at the top of your iceberg, these are your events. You start to measure these, understand what's happening. You start to identify the events on your platform, the interactions that happen, each micro step a customer is taking or a potential customer is taking on your website. You need to be able to measure this. Then you start building reports, so you start to identify patterns of behavior. Like, when you take all of these single instances in time and you plot them on a time series, How does that look? What type of patterns start to emerge in your product? What are the things you start to account for that you can explain? What are the things you can't, you can't account for? And that's when you move down into the next layer, which is system structure. So you start doing analysis of your systems. How do they work together, whether it's across a macro level, across your organization, or within your subsystem? Is there a certain feature that is causing pain or in the overall experience? Are there two features that are highly correlated and interacting with each other, which are driving some effect further down the line? Whatever these are, you start to measure them. And finally, you start to build mental models. You start to understand your customers, why they came to you, what they're looking for, what drives them. And once you understand these mental models, you can start going back, changing your system, and starting to improve those outcome metrics. It's a lot of theory. I really hate theory sometimes. I mean, I like it. I did maths at university, so for me, theory is like the bread and butter of everything I do. But I like to see it in a practical example. So you start at the top of the iceberg. What does that look like? How do you build your events? How do you define what that looks like? And again, most of you will be familiar with this, customer journey maps, right? This is not a new concept within product. However, using those customer journey maps to map out your interaction points, the points you care about, the things you want to measure and quantify in the customer experience, that's where I'm coming from. Actually, when you're building these customer journey maps, have you thought about the measurability of your product? What are the events you're going to need to track over in that product? And again, I'm going to go off script a little bit. I'm going to talk a bit about this event. So if I was product-led Alliance, I'd be thinking about, okay, well, I want to see how many of you registered for the event. Then I want to see how many of you turned up. I want to see each interaction that you had with a speaker. I want to measure how many of you are going into this room. I want to measure, is Bav the best person to put on at 11:45 just before lunch, a prime spot to talk to all of you who have come here to gain something? Actually, oh, no one turned up for my talk. Why was that? Maybe he's got a bad reputation. Maybe just a crap speaker. Whatever it is, you start to measure these things. And when you go back to your product, these can be linear journeys, right? Some products are very linear. You start, especially an e-commerce product, you start with your homepage, you work your way across, right, till you end up to your checkout process. Or they can be single-page applications. I used to work at, I used to work at Gusto, and it's mostly an app where you would order food, and there's no step 1, step 2, step 3. There are multiple permutations happening of the customer experience within a single app. Customers going from vegetarian recipes to meat recipes to healthy recipes. Clearly not me. I'm never eaten a healthy meal in my life. I joke. Self-deprecating humor is always fun. Even if you don't do it as complex as what I've done here, these are the customer journey maps that we built at Hopin. You can use Post-it notes. You're a working product. You'll love Post-it notes, right? I always feel sorry for the person who has to digitize those Post-it notes afterwards. Like, who is that person? Whatever you do, it doesn't matter. Just keep it simple. Map it. Once you start to map it, you start to understand what your customers are going through. Then you start to understand what are the points you want to measure. Then you go further down. You start to look for patterns of behavior emerging from your product. What you see here is, I love this. It's a framework I use internally. They're heat maps. So I work in product analytics. We don't have direct measurable KPIs or anything like that. So when I'm setting Q3 goals and objectives for my team, a lot of them will be around delivery of work. And actually, I use these heat maps to do this. And they're very effective. So what you see here is, on the left-hand side is our product areas. The second column is our pods that sit within those areas. Then we had whether or not those North Star, each one of those areas had a North Star metric defined. Then we looked at whether or not they had KPIs defined. And then, it's not in this one, but we had a column that showed whether they had reporting and data available. When I joined, Hopin they were on a data journey. So they didn't actually have much of that on the left. Fast forward 6 months later, we now have, my team and I worked with our product team to ensure that each pod had KPIs defined. We made sure, we did a very heuristic analysis of the data availability. That allowed us to see whether or not, how much event tracking we needed to put into place, how much engineering time we needed to get those events in place. And then we built reports off the back of them. Obviously, where we don't have data, we don't have reports. It's fairly obvious. But Over time, we saw that map go green. There was always limitations, engineering resources, time, blah, 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 all of those things. But eventually, we got to a point where we were able to map everything, and that resulted in us being able to map out the patterns that were emerging out of our user customer behaviors. These could be like the number of events customers were running. It could be how people were interacting with certain things. Actually, having run my own personal events, as well as working at Hopin, I actually have a deep understanding of what drives success in events. And I'll come to it in momentarily, but you can start to learn things about your customers that you never would have, obviously some of the things are obvious, but some things you start to learn about as you start to read the data. Then system structure, analysis of parts. How do the parts work together, and how do you influence those overall trends? What you'll see here on the left, maybe I'll use this again, I'll use this event as an example. If I was the product-led alliance guys, I'd be walking around, maybe encouraging you all to get more involved, ask more questions, ask surveys, encourage you to go and speak to partners, all of those things. And there'll be a reason for those things, right? You obviously don't want to make customers do things for no reason. There'll be a reason, and I'll come to those again momentarily. Here I've got 3 examples of 3 analyses we did. So on the top left, we were trying to understand what drives multiple events, like customers, why, what are our customers, why were they running more events, how many of them were running fewer events? And we realized that actually customers who were running simple events, like really basic webinars, were more likely to run more events per year, but actually customers who were running like these big, massive, complex events, they're more likely to run fewer events, which makes sense. Again, it's not rocket science, it's not completely out of the worlds of reality, but we can now quantify it. We know as a company, we want our organizers to run more events. Okay, maybe make them a bit more simple. Look at your previous events. What are the things you could strip out? How do you optimize it? On the bottom left here, this was a really interesting one. We were trying to understand what drives real events. So people come onto a platform, they'll create an event, but they'll never materialize an event where we've got attendees. And we realized that actually, if we can get customers to modify and customize the event experience beyond a certain number of steps, then the likelihood for that to turn into a real event starts to increase. My favorite one on the right there, we were obsessed with retention. Obviously, we're a SaaS company. What are the features that drive retention? I'm not going to talk about this too much right now. I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. But we learned something really deep about our customers. And although our customers were organizers, their customers, you all, the attendees. That's where we learned that's where we started to build mental models about our customers. So what we were trying to understand was what drives organizer retention. And we realized that it was the number of events organizers run. Makes sense. You paid for a platform. If you use that platform, you're more likely to renew. If you don't, you're more likely to cancel, right? Again, it's not rocket science. But what are the levers that we can pull to get organizers to run more events? That's where we realized audience engagement was a massive, massive factor in this. And the more engaged you all were, the more likely it was that they were going to run another event. So, now it starts to break the mental models we had. We were so focused on the people who pay us money, we didn't care as much about the customers they cared about. So that was one of the fascinating mental models. That helped us build the overall understanding of what drives retention. So it's active organizers, of course, base number of organizers times our active organizer rate, fairly straightforward. Events per organizer, so attendee engagement rate times the event ROI. So the product-led alliance, as you know, I know it's a community, but there is some ROI, whether it's growth of the community, whether it's revenue, whatever it is. Some of these things, if they can see an ROI, they're more likely to run more events. And then customer experience. See, we have a crappy platform. If we have a crappy platform, no one's going to want to use us again. It's fairly straightforward. So these started to shape our beliefs, and it allowed us to understand what our customers care about. So how do you act on all this information? See, I'm smiling now, finally. Well, this starts to feed your entire system, right? You have your product, which drives marketing. You now know that attendee engagement is important. You start publishing content that your product marketing team can start publishing content about how to drive audience engagement. You have your sales team. You know the features that drive engagement within the platform. Hey, don't worry about like one-to-one networking, that's crap, no one uses that. Care about polls, questions, get your audience to ask questions. Customer service will feed into product. Joining Hopin was an overwhelmingly humbling experience for me because we were at the early stages of our data journey, so we didn't have that much data. So I started looking around and I started speaking to our CS team. Actually, we started finding fascinating insights which we could then quantify. It just allowed us to not go down too many rabbit holes. So we were quite a lean team as well. And yeah, basically, the lower down you go on the iceberg, the more you can improve the customer experience. So at the top level, you're only just really reacting. The second level, you're starting to anticipate. Third level, you're starting to design systems that improve the customer experience. And at the bottom level, the final foundation model of this iceberg, you're starting to transform your customer experience. It all begins with measuring, product analytics. Yeah, that's it really. So I guess my key takeaways would be, if you do work in product, start to think about those 4 elements of your system. Well, start to think about your product as a system. Then start to think about, actually, can you measure your system? Then can you report on that system and identify patterns? Then can you start to do some type of interaction analysis, understand how your subsystems and components start to work together, and finally, what type of mental model do they paint? That was it. So are we okay for time? Perfect. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Bob. So jump into Slido, throw some questions in there. Bob, was there anybody who didn't raise their hands at the beginning?
No, I think everyone raised
Okay,
their hands.
all right. I
Thank you
just
so
want to
much.
make sure everybody, just like if you're in the wrong room, I wanted to help you find the, you might be looking for the room next door. Also, it would be amazing to work at a company where we have a professional like Bob working with us. Maybe. He's unemployed right now. I'm just saying. All right? I'm just saying.
I should have plugged that, actually. I'm starting to take 6 months off. I'm thinking about moving out of analytics and moving to product, maybe. So there you go.
Ooh, all right, all right. Also, nobody digitizes the Post-it notes. I just wanted to follow up with that.
I know.
No one actually does that. I'm using Confluence right now for that reason. I have lost so much information on Post-it notes, just to follow up on that. And then always talk to customer success.
Yep.
That team. Data or no data, it's amazing the insights they'll have, and that PMs don't know, salespeople don't know, because they get stuck with the rest. Send in your questions. I have a few questions right off the top of my head. First off, you mentioned CSAT, which I worked as a product marketer for a little bit. Not a good one, but some people are married to CSAT scores. So how, in 30-second elevator pitch, would you pitch to someone, don't just look at CSAT, look at one of these indicators that you talked about?
Yeah, product folks love CSAT. I don't know why. It's a good metric, don't get me wrong, but it only paints part of the picture. And our product team were obsessed with it. We had CSAT scores, CSAT surveys popping up every 5 seconds on the website. And I did a full audit, and I was like, look, all of this crap, you can use quantitative measures rather than qualitative measures. So actually, if you can, for the customer experience, if nothing else, remove as many CSATs as you can and try to quantify the experience. Where you can't, make sure you've got enough of a sample size for it to be meaningful.
All right, Product Marketing Summit is happening right across the room. I'd like you to go just share that in the same space, just see what people do. Okay, so what's one of the most surprising levers you've found in mental models?
I think, to be fair, this is the top one for me. I should have known better, actually, but when you're working in the product, you're so in this echo chamber of just product and your customer, product and your customer. And I'm starting to realize, actually, there are factors outside of your control that you either can or can't influence. Identify the ones you can and start to influence them. So I think that was the best one. I don't know if this is a mental model, but I like fun facts. And when I was working at Moo's a business card company, we found pockets of the country which had really high conversion rates. And these were in obscure, in areas you would never think about. It wasn't your Londons, your Manchesters, your Birminghams, all those places. It was Southeast England, Cornwall. And you realize there's lots of independent retailers there who are buying business cards. And actually you can start to if you get out of the headspace of just thinking about your core product, you can start to find all of these amazing insights that can drive mental models. So I don't know, that was probably a long-winded answer way of saying.
It's cool. It's cool. Inquiring minds want to know, what's on your hand?
Oh, my notes.
Ah, I love it. I love it. So cool.
Well, the big one that says speak slowly. I've been told I speak too fast.
You did well.
I was,
You did well. We'd give you a hand, but you got it covered. So what data have you found most persuasive when influencing product teams in the organization?
This is a tough one because I've written about this, and my job is not to make the decision, which is a painful part of my role. Everyone here seen the movie The Godfather? Hands up if you've seen Godfather? Yeah. So the product analytics team is the consigliere. They play the right-hand person of the product team. It's their job to know everything about the business. I mean, I don't know any fun facts that you find interesting right now. Oh, we found checkout was dropping 95% and they were working on something else. We got them to pivot to something else, blah, blah, blah. But actually, my job as a product analyst is to give you all the tools to make decisions. Because at the end of the day, experiments, analytics, it doesn't matter. The key is being able to make a decision, right? And some people go down rabbit holes looking for those needles in the haystack, bits of insights. Sometimes they don't exist. There is no silver bullet. I can give you as much information I have, but it's ultimately your job to make that decision. If you're unable to make a decision, terrible at your job, no offense. If you can't make a decision.
Speaking of the silver bullet, or maybe the aluminum bullet, or the aluminium bullet, why are we disagreeing on this? Come on. Where did that extra letter come from? Or where did we lose it? Come on, let's bring our language together. Qualitative versus quantitative data. Does qualitative still have a place and a value?
I think so. I love qualitative data. As I said, hopping was a humbling experience for me. I'm so used to having an inordinate amount of data that I can make inferences off of or run hypothesis testing that sometimes I don't need to do qualitative analysis. But actually, I found things, we found some really fascinating insights from looking at qualitative data. So I think it has its place. One thing I will say, research, it depends on what type of obviously, qualitative data exists on a spectrum. You have your full-blown research projects, which take 3 months. I'm not a fan of those. I like the snappier stuff. I think desk research is an important thing. If you can go out onto Google, start looking for studies that already exist. Google Scholar is one of my favorite platforms to go and look for studies that have been done by academic people. You don't need to reinvent the wheel sometimes. So again, I do love qualitative data.
Awesome.
I think that's a question.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
I was just wondering, and I might sound a little bit daft here, but when I was working with one of my former employers, they were really focused on hardware products, right? So they would be able to track all the metrics on how much hardware did they sell and who and whatever. And then when we started releasing software, they didn't know how to quantify that. It was so hard to get some quantitative data from the marketing team or the analytics team because they didn't know how to quantify that. Have you run into?
Yeah, I think when you start producing software and products, I say start off with your finance team, right? Understand how you make money as a company. Yeah. So at my last 3-4 jobs, I build what's called a unit economic tree. So I start off with the top thing that the company cares about, and that would be revenue usually. Then you break that down. What is revenue? Well, revenue is orders times AOV. What is orders? Orders is customers times conversion rate. What is conversion rate? Cost, blah, blah, blah. And the further down you go, the fuzzier it starts to become, of course. But that's when it starts to be like leading indicators. They're not gospel, they only need to be directionally accurate. So that's how I would quantify it. If you can paint out that picture of how this gets you to that, it's really hard to argue with it. Even if it's not an exact science, it's good enough, I think, in my opinion.
All right. Well, Bob, the analytics have spoken, and you were the right speaker to put in this slot. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for joining us.
I'll be at the Amplitude booth if anyone has any questions.
All right.